conquer and we're going to take some. Is that understood? Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do, sweethearts. We are going to go and get some. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you?
Read EP Magazine's February issue to learn tips for medical and dental visits with an individual with special needs. Also check out the military section. To read more, sign up for free today at www.epmagazine.com.
Monotony. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Dull, tedious, just plain boring. But what is this? A contender, perhaps? Something unboring by the looks of it. Jabs right at dull, an uppercut to tedium, something that keeps you on your toes, keeps your head on a swivel, a knockout punch to your old, boring workouts. Welcome to Fight Camp.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, 2 Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. 2 Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, 2 lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
I remember a time when I was in a not so good place, and these games and these activities and being able to come and have the camaraderie that we have here, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. There are people here that have been through what I've been through. It makes me feel like I don't know, I'm part of something great.
Just let yourself go. Give it a try.
Welcome back. One of the last surviving members of the famed Tuskegee Airmen passed away over the weekend in Bloomfield Hills at the age of 100. A few years ago, I had the privilege to talk with Lieutenant Colonel Harry T. Stewart about some of his experiences in World War II and the injustice he faced being a black fighter pilot in a segregated military. As a way to honor Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, here's that story, which we originally aired back in 2019.
Uniformly, with the exception of all people, regardless of race, color, creed, or gender.
It was retired Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart's childhood dream to become a pilot. That dream would come true, but not without exceptions.
What was it like to fly the P-51?
Oh, delightful. It was like an extension of my own arms and this type of thing. I was part of the airplane, and the airplane was part of me.
The Bloomfield Hills resident talks in depth about his experiences as a combat pilot in a new book called Soaring to Glory.
This is also a historical content in the book here.
African Americans were not accepted for pilot training into the Army Air Corps until World War II, and even then, only under the condition that they train as a segregated unit. Tuskegee Army Airfield was the only training base for black pilots.
My feeling was that I'm vested in this country, I am a citizen of this country, and what I'm doing is fighting for my rights.
By the age of 20, Lieutenant Colonel Stewart was at the controls of a P-51. It was his job to fly the bomber escorts for the B-17s and B-24s and protect the white crew members from enemy fighters.
It was quite a responsibility and quite an onus on us to go ahead and be sure to protect those bombers to the best of our ability.
He would go on to fly dozens of combat missions with the 301st Fighter Squadron, known as the Red Tails, shooting down German planes in 1944. By the end of World War II, he had become an American hero. But when he returned home,
the same old, same old. It was just the same as when I left, and the opportunities were no greater or anything like that, and no benefits given as far as the training that you got and the new skill that I got. I personally tried to apply with 2 airlines that had offices in the New York area at the time there, and I was rejected because of my skin color. When I got out, I couldn't find any what I would call a decent job at all, and I ended up as a baggage man on the railroad, and this was in Pennsylvania Station, New York. And I worked down 3 levels underground in what was like a dungeon, taking bags of magazines off of a freight car. It was a dirty job.
He later went to school to become an engineer, working his way up the corporate ladder to the executive level. In his retirement, he spent time introducing aviation to young people, teaching them to persevere by not letting failures or hurt feelings waste your energy. The same message he hopes readers will take away from his book.
I think I'd like it to inspire youth, mainly, and from the standpoint of pursuing their dreams and going after their dreams aggressively, and don't let defeat down them. You're going to run into disappointments and things like that, but keep your eye on the prize.
And in a statement, Tuskegee Airmen Museum President Brian Smith said, quote, Harry Stewart was a kind man of profound character and accomplishment with a distinguished career of service. He continued long after fighting for our country in World War II. We are deeply saddened by his passing and extend our condolences to his family and friends around the world.
Hello and welcome to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Today is part 2 of the Black History Month special that I'm doing with support and collaboration with the Executive Office of Veteran Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As I said in special number 1, the EOVS is there to provide services, support, and direction for veterans advocacy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I'm so happy to be doing this 4-part special with them. Again, the first one was, why we're doing this, who the EOVS is, so on and so forth, and the need to understand the legacy of our Black Americans who served their country with pride and honor. This one is about the Tuskegee Airmen, one of my favorite parts of American military history. Part 3 will be about General Harriet Tubman. Very interesting story there. And then the 4th part is with Deputy Secretary Andrea Gayle-Bennett, who will come on and talk about her experiences, her advocacy, and how this all ties into the Black military experience. The Tuskegee Airmen is one of my favorite things. Now, in the military, you see the rocket, the missile on, it's a missile, not a rocket, sorry. The hot missile on my shirt. I spent time learning how to shoot down airplanes. But it's one of those things you had to learn about airplanes to shoot them down. aircraft ID was very important. But even before then, I was, as a kid, captivated by the P-51 Mustang and the men and women, primarily men, who flew them back then, you know, the Amelia Earhart days, so on and so forth. And over and over again, if you want to understand the legacy of the P-51 Mustang, you had to understand the service of the Tuskegee Airmen, or the Red Tails, and we'll get into all that. So I am just pumped to get excited about this. Air defense in terms of Hawk was not around during World War II, so we won't go into all that, but I just can't wait to share with you how I feel about the Tuskegee Airmen, and not so much about, you know, their actual service history, which is, you know, been talked about a whole lot, but how they got to be where they got to be, lessons in advocacy, and legacy of service and history to our country. You have to understand that at one time in our country, Black service members were either A, not allowed, or B, relegated to support MOSs because they weren't considered adequate to serve in combat, which has always, in my view, been a black mark, literally, on our military history. Because Black Americans served in the Civil War, served in the Revolutionary War, served in other conflicts, in the infantry, did dangerous missions, and executed at a high level. So I was always curious why they weren't considered good enough for jobs like flight. And it might seem not a big deal now, but there was a time where it was a very big deal. The 1920s, 1930s, there was Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, who I've talked about, and this real interest in flying. And in 1938, with the prospect of another great war, World War I had ended, President Roosevelt said, hey, we need to get more pilots in the United States. And so they put out this call to train a lot of civilian pilots and get them trained as civilian pilots, so if a war did happen, they could jump into aircraft and fly military aircraft. But many people in the military believed that Black Americans could not fly with competence, could not operate these, you know, machines at a high level. And so the NAACP and other entities began to, you know, campaign for this. Like, why aren't we good enough? We just want to see how we do. We want to see at the table. We want to be able to serve our country in this way, and we believe that we're good enough. And, you know, one of the things that came about was the White House agreed to set up a program at the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama, and start this program. And Tuskegee is notable because it was the home of the prestigious Booker T. Washington School right in the South. And, you know, Booker T. Washington did not serve the military, but he certainly had a profound impact on America and Black Americans. So in 1941, there were 13 members of the first class to go through this. And one of the first men who distinguished himself was Benjamin Davis. And he was the son of a Brigadier General Davis, one of two at the time, two Black officers in the military at that time, other than chaplains. So think about what they went through to be serving in that capacity and to get to the rank of Brigadier General. And so the class started. But it wasn't until Eleanor Roosevelt went to the airfield to check on, you know, the Tuskegee Airmen and see what was going on that this program really got, for lack of a better term, wings. whether it's allegedly all like documented. She went down there and she wanted to fly in one of the aircraft, which was a complete not part of the agenda. And they're like, well, ma'am, we're not sure about that. We're not, we don't know how we can allow that. And she's like, well, I want to fly with one of these aviators. And if you've trained them, right? You trained them. Yes, ma'am, I have. Well, then they should be good enough to take me for a flight. I want to go for a flight. And it's just, it's kind of like, now it's kind of like, wow, why, how could that even have happened? But it did happen. And because this woman, the first lady who said, you know what? No, not, I'm going to, trust that these aviators are good enough and I want them to get this chance to serve their country, that this whole thing took off. Because the story goes, she got in the aircraft, went for a flight, she took some pictures, the whole time the thing landed, and she's like, well, why can't these guys, serve our country? Why can't they be, in a combat situation? Everything changed. And I think that's what I want to focus on. There's instances in history, and this is just one of them, where one person. So these black aviators went down there and, took the instruction, and in training aircraft, learned how to do the best job they could as pilots, because they wanted to serve, they wanted to fly, they wanted to serve their country in this way. So they went down to, Alabama, the heart of the Deep South, and dealt with some of the racist elements of being in the South, but still wanted to serve. So they had the opportunity. And then one person says, you know what? I want to fly with them. If a white person trained this black person to the highest degree of proficiency, it shouldn't be a problem. Can you imagine this happening now? Would, any of our first ladies in the last, 10 presidents do something like that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Hypothesis is simply that. But the fact of the matter is, Eleanor Roosevelt said, hey, I want to go for a flight. And I think if nothing else that we get out of the Tuskegee Airmen story is one person can make a difference. One person raised their hand and says, yes, I want to serve this way. I want to fly. I want to be in an aircraft and serve my country. And then another person said, you know what? It's wrong that they don't have the opportunity to at least learn. And then another person said, hey, we're going to lobby for this at the White House, up to the president. We're not going to quit. We're not going to stop. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm too this or that I can't fly. Maybe I can't see. But I can raise my voice for those that want to serve. And then, someone comes down from all parts of the country and says, I'm going to try out for this program and learn what I can. And all these things happen, but it's still not good enough. And then one other person comes in and says, take me for a flight. I want to fly with you. You're good enough. I believe in you, and I want to fly with you. And so to me, the wider message here is not, and it is, because, we'll get into their service here in World War II here in a minute. But I think the main point I want to get across for anyone, and why this story is timeless, and why it should always be told, why it should be part of, military curriculum, why it should be part of our history, is the fact that anybody at any time, if they see an injustice, can raise their voice and say, this is wrong, we want change, and we want to have a seat at the table. Because that's all they were asking for. We believe we're good enough. We've served our grandparents, our parents, our great-grandparents served this country, and we want our chance. We want to serve. We want to serve in this way. How do we do it? And a lot of people came together to make it happen, but it took one person at a time saying, enough's enough. This is wrong. We want to change. And to me, whenever I read about the Tuskegee Airmen, that's the lesson I get. It's not good enough to be on the sideline. It's not good enough to be on the runway watching the planes take off. You have to raise your voice. You have to raise your hand. You have to be counted. And then you got to go make change. So this program gets going. And during this time from like the 1938 to 1941, right, there was like 14,000 people that went through Tuskegee. So in 1943, think about it, it took, 5-6 years to get this thing going. The 99th Pursuit Squadron deployed to North Africa. Hot, dusty. I've read several stories where, B-17 and, other aircraft mechanics, the bullets were bad enough, but it was the dust in the engines that really made, the aircraft hard to keep in the sky and keep operational. And a lot of times, if there was a failure, it wasn't because of a bullet, it was because the conditions were so bad and these engines were not designed to operate in that kind of environment with the heat and the dust and the sand, literally destroying engines in one mission. And so they get to North Africa, Patton versus Rommel. We hear all about that, but there were other aircraft missions up there, and they don't fly the P-51 Mustangs right away. They fly P-40 airplanes. The P-40, the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. That's right. The Curtiss, that's 2 S's, P-40 Warhawk. Single engine, single seat plane, fighter bomber, multi-purpose aircraft that was built in 1938. And it was designed to do a lot of different roles, air-to-air combat, close air support, light bombing. And it was the precursor, the older brother, older cousin to the P-51 Mustang. And it was pedestrian. It was serviceable. You have to remember that back then, we really didn't have the development into our military aircraft that Germany did, that Japan did. You could even argue that to a certain degree, at the first onset of World War II, we were behind Britain in how we built aircraft. The B-17 is a perfect example of that. If you look at it versus the other countries' bombers in its class, it was a very rough design, not very elegant, not very anything. It was just tough as nails, and we could build hundreds of them a day. That's what we had. So the P-40 Warhawk was what the airmen flew first, and it was kind of like being the Marine Corps. It was the leftover aircraft that the other units didn't want that was given to Tuskegee Airmen. But they flew it. And at first it was rough. They didn't do so well because, again, it was an older aircraft, not very well maintained or supported or upgraded, and it was just not able to hang with some of the German aircraft out there. And General Davis had to go and defend his men flying this aircraft. Well, they removed, the 99th was moved to Italy, and they served along the 79th Fighter Group. It wasn't until 1944 where, 99th Squadron pilots started getting a lot of kills on Germans. In February 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was formed, and these aviators got to fly the P-51 Mustang. And this is where these airmen really came into their own. And they did raids deep into German territory. They painted their tail fin red, and so they came with the nickname the Red Tails. And they started getting a lot of kills. And they did escorts for B-17 bomber groups. They did raids. They did a whole lot of other things. And the story goes, out of the 200 escort missions this group flew, they didn't lose a single one. Now, I've read different things on history.com and other things that's not necessarily the truth. They did lose bombers. What I've been able to see is the analysis showed that that group lost 25, 26, 27, somewhere in there. But it was drastically lower than their white counterparts who lost anywhere during the same time period, same unit. Their white counterparts lost upwards of 50 bombers. And we consider the number of crew each bomber has. There's 2 pilots, a navigator, a bombardier, tail gunner, 2 waist gunners, a belly, and a nose gunner, and the top dorsal gunner, times 50 times 25. There's a lot of lives that are lost when one of these things goes down. And so they were so good that the Germans, would see the red tails and say, no, we're not even going to try this. We're out. And again, the war was kind of winding down. Hitler could not field the Messerschmitts the way that he could in the earlier parts of the war. A lot of those pilots had gotten killed. The people replacing them were not as good as they were, 3-4 years ago in the war. And these airmen, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, got much, much better at what they did. And so by the time the 332nd flew the last combat mission, which was April 26, 1945, they had flown over 15,000 individual sorties in 2 years of combat. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. And they went on to change the whole way things were done for other service members going into the military after World War II and when the Air Force was formed. Because again, remember, back in World War II, there was no Air Force. It was the Army Air Corps is what it was called. It was part of the Army, kind of like the Marine Corps is part of the Navy. Yes, that's the truth. We're part of the Navy. The Air Corps was a division of the Army, and that's how it was until the Air Force was formed. But what these men did during their service paved the way for not only other black aviators in the Air Force, but also for other races to serve in ways they wanted to. We talked here on Oscar Mike Radio about Japanese Americans and Chinese Americans serving during World War II and then going on to take aviator type roles, rotary wing. All that was paved by the Tuskegee Airmen. And so as we go into, Black History Month, I just feel, even with the current climate, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on or what's after your name or how you voted, it doesn't matter. This kind of story needs to be remembered from now until time ends. Because without people deciding that, hey, we want to serve, we want to raise our hand and swear an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And one of the things that really gets me when I read about this is these men and women wanted to serve our country at a time where, let's be honest here, America really didn't want them. And I've always wondered why that is. Like, what was going on inside their minds that said, you know what, even though I'm not allowed to do this, I'm not allowed to do that, I'm thought of less than, I have to go to the back of the bus. There's whites only restaurants, places to go, businesses, and I'm not seen as an equal, much less as a fellow American to a lot of people. What prompted them to say, you know what, even though all that is what I deal with on a daily basis for my family and my children and my parents, I still want to raise the hand and serve my country. I think that is what we need to really focus on more than anything else. That and one person said enough's enough. I deserve to serve. I deserve to be here. And you know what? I want to go on a flight with one of these aviators. There's a lot we can learn. And the reason I think this needs to be told, and the reason I'm so happy to get the support from the Executive Office of Veteran Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is the fact that we should not forget. We can never forget, ever, And so I want you to watch this, learn from it. I'll have some links to different, information sources I use to build this show in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. I'll have the link to the Executive Office of Veteran Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You can go there and learn about what they do and how they serve veterans in the Commonwealth. And again, I'm really, really pumped for the Harriet Tubman story. I mean, talk about an original badass. She is absolutely one of them. I just can't wait. So next on Oscar Mike Radio, because we did this at 7 p.m., at 8 p.m. coming up next is On Mission Motorsports with 22-0. So I met On Mission Motorsports through the 22-0 organization. They have an interesting story, a husband and wife team. You won't want to miss it. Next week, come back at 7 o'clock for part 3 with Harriet Tubman, General Harriet Tubman, and Donald Jeffries, who is a very interesting view on American history with his time in the Navy. We're Oscar Mike, Mission Flight. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
The biggest fear Gold Star families have that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.